Have you ever walked into a dark room and suddenly felt like you were being watched, even though you were completely alone? Now imagine that same feeling, but coming from a doll. Yes, a simple porcelain doll, glassy eyes fixed on you still, yet somehow filled with something that feels alive. Supernatural accounts involving cursed dolls aren't just movie plots. They come from real people, from all over the world, who swear they've lived through experiences they still can't explain. Child spirits trapped in toys. Objects charged with strange energy. Whispers in the middle of the night. Nightmares that begin the moment a doll enters the home. Coincidence? The most disturbing part? Many of these stories begin innocently. A gift passed down from a grandmother. A casual thrift store purchase. A toy long forgotten in the attic. But then come the signs: furniture that moves, flickering lights, sudden arguments out of nowhere. And at the center of it all, her. Always her. The doll. What lies behind these enchanted, or rather, Jigeets embrujados? Are spiritual entities truly manifesting through seemingly harmless objects? Or are these experiences nothing more than illusions, fed by ancient fears and passed down through generations as part of a supernatural oral tradition? Get ready to dive into a universe where psychological terror merges with real accounts, and where fear hides in the fixed stare of a silent doll. This video is for those brave enough to confront the paranormal, even if it means sleeping with the lights on afterward. Have you ever heard someone say their little sister's doll appeared on the other side of the house by itself? Surprisingly, it's not rare to find real-life accounts of dolls that seem to have a will of their own. Many of these stories come from everyday people, folks who've never dabbled in the occult, never sought out the supernatural. What starts as an innocent gift or sentimental heirloom often turns into sleepless nights and uneasy glances. In one such story, a woman inherited an old porcelain doll from her aunt brought over from Europe. At first, nothing happened. But within days, the doll began to show up in different rooms around the house. No one admitted to moving it. What's more unsettling? The doll's eyes always seemed to be watching someone, following whoever entered the room. It's the small things that heighten the tension. A faint sound of a child giggling in the hallway. A slight change in the doll's expression, a twitch of a smile or a tiny frown. These stories often come from people who claim they're not easily frightened, yet found themselves overwhelmed with dread when they noticed the doll had moved closer to the bed than it was the night before. Object possession, especially of toys, is a recurring theme in paranormal studies. Some believe these items act as portals, making it easier for spiritual entities to manifest. And once that negative energy settles in, it feeds on fear. That's why many who live through these encounters report intense nightmares, a sense of a malignant presence, and waves of anxiety with no logical cause. Even more disturbing are the cases where attempts to get rid of the doll completely fail. A woman in rural Brazil threw the same doll away 3 times. Each time, it came back. Dirty, but intact. Always found sitting on the porch. These enchanted toys defy logic and continue to fuel supernatural oral traditions that span generations. And beneath every tale, the same question lingers: is it all just imagination? There's something in the glassy stare of a porcelain doll that seems to hide secrets. Old dolls, especially handcrafted ones with fabric dresses and real human hair, are often the focus of supernatural reports. Many were bought by chance at flea markets or antique fairs, places where the energy of forgotten belongings seems to linger, almost as if the objects themselves had memories or a soul. A young woman in Curitiba shared that after buying a doll at a charity bazaar, she began suffering from insomnia and strange feelings in her room. The doll, made of cloth with button eyes, looked harmless. But from the moment it arrived, The room felt colder and heavier. Disturbing dreams, nighttime noises, and that overwhelming feeling of being watched became part of her daily life. Many of these dolls are directly tied to people who have passed away: grandmothers, aunts, or even complete strangers whose belongings were donated after death. This raises the question: could these dolls be soaked in negative energy, or worse, a malevolent presence? What was meant to be a sweet memory becomes, for many, the beginning of a haunting. Mediums and psychics claim that certain high-energy objects act as spiritual anchors. Dolls, especially those that represent children, are common targets of object possession. They tend to attract child spirits confused, lost, or emotionally tied to the material world. And the doll, fragile as it may appear, becomes an active channel for spiritual manifestation. Some of the most chilling stories involve dolls passed down through generations and kept for decades inside haunted homes. In these places, constant arguments, mysterious illnesses, and even sudden pet deaths begin after the arrival of the doll. Coincidence? Maybe. But many believe some objects carry far more than just memories. When a doll begins to whisper or move on its own, it's no longer superstition, it's a warning. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a young man who swore he heard his doll whisper his sister's name. At 3 in the morning. The toy was locked in a cabinet. No one else was in the room. He began writing down the time and the phrases and soon discovered it happened every night at the same hour. In addition to whispers, people report nearby objects falling for no reason. Pictures crash to the ground. Books fly off shelves. Glasses explode without warning, all within a few feet of the doll. These physical manifestations suggest intense energy, often linked to a spiritual entity. Some residents even report hearing the giggles of unseen children or the sound of tiny footsteps running through the hallway. A recurring element in many of these stories is the sensation of being watched. Even when the doll remains still, it feels like its eyes follow your every move. For some, the feeling is suffocating, as if the entire room is filled with a dark, oppressive energy. And strangely enough, whenever the doll is nearby, the house feels colder, heavier, as though something unseen is occupying the space. Recurring nightmares are another alarming symptom. Many start dreaming of crying children, voices asking for help, or even the doll itself moving, trying to speak. The psychological horror becomes so intense that some people develop insomnia, fear of the dark, or even panic attacks. And it only worsens when they try to ignore the signs. Though the details differ, these stories all share one thread: the presence of an object with energy, usually an old doll, that sparks events beyond reason. Paranormal activity begins subtly, but grows. Until one day, it can no longer be ignored. But what if these signs point to something deeper? Even spiritual? The answer may lie in the next step of this chilling journey. In many of these stories, the explanation goes beyond coincidence and into the realm where the occult and the spiritual intersect. Some dolls are described by mediums as true spiritual vessels, capable of housing entities that haven't yet moved on. In particular, child spirits often latch onto toys, forming invisible bonds with objects that remind them of their past lives. The danger? These entities aren't always innocent. There are stories where activity intensifies after spiritual sessions or visits to psychics. A man from Sao Paulo took his inherited doll to a local spiritual healer. The moment she touched it, she fainted. When she came to, she said a dark spirit, not a child, but a disguised malevolent presence, was trapped inside. After that, the man reported that the atmosphere in his home changed dramatically: constant arguments, broken objects, and a lingering sense of unease. Some dolls are believed to have been prepared during dark rituals, becoming vessels for curses. That might explain why these dolls seem to choose their owners. They appear out of nowhere, are found in strange places, or come back after being discarded. The idea of Jaggeets Embrojado's haunted toys isn't new. It spans cultures, borders, and generations. And at the heart of every story, there's always pain, magic, or death. In certain occult sects, children's objects are used as symbols of corrupted innocence. That's why some dolls delicate in appearance are consecrated in rituals, turning them into containers for spiritual energies or entities. The most disturbing part? You never truly know what's inside. It's only when the manifestations begin that you realize something isn't right. These links to the occult turn the doll into something far more than a toy. It becomes a portal between worlds. And object possession takes on a new meaning when we consider the possibility that the doll may carry intentions or even intelligence beyond human comprehension. And once that door opens, it's not so easy to close. But what happens when that darkness begins to spread throughout the house? When a doll becomes the center of a haunted home, the signs go far beyond odd behavior. Couples who never argued suddenly start fighting. Pets become restless, sick, or disappear entirely. It's as if the doll's negative energy seeps into every room. Many accounts mention that the house itself changes colder, eerier, as though an invisible weight hangs in the air. One of the most chilling stories comes from a family in Santa Catarina. They received a doll from a distant relative's estate. Within days, doors began to slam on their own, lights flickered, and the youngest daughter started talking to a little girl no one else could see. Desperate, the parents called in a medium who said the doll was binding a spiritual entity. Strangely, after an attempted exorcism, things only got worse. The pattern is clear once peaceful homes become dense and charged. Residents report hearing whispers in the dead of night, feeling watched, or waking up with strange scratches. In some cases, the malignant presence seems tied to a specific room, often wherever the doll is kept. Some call it the cold room. Others say, it's where time doesn't move. But everyone agrees something is lurking there. The connection between cursed dolls and paranormal activity is so strong that people often try to get rid of them. But they rarely succeed. There are countless accounts of dolls that return, appearing back on the bed after being thrown away, or mysteriously showing up again after being donated. Some don't even burn. Worse yet, when they do, the paranormal activity increases. It's like destroying the doll only angers what's inside. Living in a haunted home with a cursed doll goes beyond fear. It affects your health, your relationships, your very sanity. Occult specialists claim that once a doll's curse is activated, its energy can spread to everything around it. And that brings us to the darkest part of this journey, when you try to get rid of the doll. And the consequences spiral out of control. When fear becomes unbearable, many try to end it once and for all. Throw it out, bury it, donate it, even burn it. Anything to be rid of what's now seen not as a toy, but a threat. The problem? In most real supernatural accounts, these efforts not only fail, they make everything worse. As if the spirit inside felt insulted. Or retaliated. A girl from Recife tried to bury a doll she'd received from her grandmother. A few days later, the doll reappeared covered in dirt on her bed. The room developed a strange odor, like mold and burnt candles. And the nightmares became constant. In another case, a woman tossed the doll into a river. 3 weeks later, a package arrived at her door with the same doll inside, dry and wide-eyed as ever. Burning the doll is one of the most desperate measures. But it doesn't always work. Some say the doll simply won't catch fire. Others say it burns. But then, something worse happens. One man from Goiás tried to burn his doll in a backyard bonfire. A strong wind blew through. The flames changed color. That night, he dreamed of a child calling him daddy and begging to come back. Mediums warn if a doll is truly cursed or possessed, the spiritual bond must be broken with specific rituals. Acting out of fear can intensify the negative energy surrounding it. After all, we're dealing with objects already charged with emotion, pain, and fear. And when desperation leads the way, the entity feeds on it and grows stronger. These real accounts show that getting rid of a cursed doll is often harder than it looks. What should have been the end often becomes the beginning of something far darker. The psychological terror deepens. The sense of helplessness grows. But is there a way to learn from these stories, or at least, to see them as a warning to avoid the next nightmare? Picture this: a dimly lit room, the sound of light footsteps on an old wooden floor, and a subtle soundtrack, high-pitched notes echoing like whispers. It's in this atmosphere that the stories come alive. The narration is calm, almost hypnotic, like an old friend telling you something they witnessed firsthand. And with each new tale, the viewer feels transported into the house itself, hearing the doll walk and feeling the chill in the air. Every story is woven with subtle sound effects: a door creaking open on its own, the faint sound of a child giggling in the background, a clock ticking at exactly 300 a.m. The goal isn't cheap jump scares, but to draw the viewer into a slow-building psychological horror. The kind that creeps up on you, the kind that makes you look twice at your own bookshelf when the video ends. The video presents the stories like puzzle pieces scattered across the screen. There's the old man speaking slowly about how his daughter's doll vanished for 2 weeks only to reappear sitting at the breakfast table. There's the young woman whispering how she woke up with the doll curled around her legs even though it had been locked in the closet the night before. This variety adds rhythm and keeps the mystery constantly alive. The voice actor's tone is everything steady, but with just enough tension to suggest they know more than they're saying. This subtle tension creates an emotional bond with the audience. They're not just listening to stories, they're feeling the fear seep into their own homes. And that's when the content transforms from entertainment into experience. At the end of each story, silence. A short pause before the next begins. It allows the viewer to breathe, or dread what's coming next. In a way, this silence is like that moment you hold your breath when you hear a whisper in the dark, unsure if it was real or just your mind playing tricks on you. In the end, no one walks away untouched. Because after stories like these, who sleeps peacefully ever again? And now, be honest, can you still look at an old doll without feeling that slight chill down your spine? Maybe you remembered a childhood toy that always seemed a little too lifelike, or a forgotten object at your grandparents' house that never quite felt right. The truth is, whether rooted in occultism, suggestion, or a real curse, these stories awaken something ancient in all of us, a primal fear of the unknown. If objects really can carry spiritual energy, how safe are we inside our own homes? How can we tell the difference between negative energy and simple paranoia? These are the kinds of questions that echo, like the whispered voices so many have claimed to hear in the middle of the night. So, what will you do with this information? Will you dismiss it and carry on as usual, or start paying closer attention to that old toy, that room that never quite feels right, that doll that always seems to fall from the same shelf? Thinking about it is already the first step towards seeing the invisible world around us. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who loves a good mystery. And remember, some stories sound like exaggeration until they happen to you. So are you ready for the next story? Or would you rather leave the dolls exactly where they are?